I am on a quest to find the best intros to movies, TV shows, and video games. And in my journey, I've come across what I believe to be the greatest superhero movie of all time, The Dark Knight. Directed by Christopher Nolan, this is more than just a simple superhero movie. It's a crime film that explores the human nature and psychology behind why people behave, believe, and act the way they do, and to what extent different people, driven by their beliefs, will carry out the most egregious or the most noble of acts. It is full of twists, dark moments, dark comedy moments, heroic actions, betrayal, and spectacular acting by none other than Heath Ledger himself. And let's all be honest, as we've gotten older and returned back to this film, we see that the Joker's ideology and look on some things was actually pretty spot on. While I could talk about this movie all day long and make an hour-long video just reviewing this film, that is not the purpose of my review. My review is focused specifically on the opening scene to The Dark Knight, and to identify whether or not it's simply a good intro. To be fully transparent, The Dark Knight is and has been my favorite movie of all time since it pretty much came out back in 2008. So I'm really going to try hard to not be super biased in my review, but I also don't want to overcompensate for being too unbiased by giving the intro a subpar review. To help me with this, I will rate the intro using 3 simple categories. Those categories are the music or sound, the storytelling, and how captivating as a whole the intro is. I will give a score out of 10 to each of these categories, then add all these scores up to get a final average score. And if there's something extra special about this intro that just doesn't fit into any of these categories but adds to the intro, then I will be awarding bonus points as well. So sit back, relax, take a load off, and enjoy another Too True SMEG review. When it comes to the music for this opening scene, the best way I can describe it is sort of like a roller coaster ride. On a roller coaster, there's usually a slow buildup of anticipation and anxiety as you're climbing to the top of the ride. Then there's a huge drop that fills you with exhilaration, which is usually the most exciting part of the ride. And then finally, you kind of coast through the rest of the ride, which is filled with various ups and downs, but typically nothing as intense as that first drop. The music here is very similar in that as we hear the single note of the violin that plays as we're slowly zooming in on the building and on the Joker's mask, we're getting this buildup of anxiety and excitement for what's going to happen. Suddenly, when the car pulls up to the Joker, and as we see these 2 clowns zipline across the buildings, we are hit with a more intense instrumental piece of music, which is essentially the big drop of the roller coaster, if you will. So far at this point, the music is just stellar. However, once the clowns run into the bank to rob it, the music goes away, which is okay, but then it comes back in waves throughout the rest of the intro. Back to the roller coaster analogy, this is when we're coasting through the rest of the ride. There's some memorable and intense parts, but some forgettable and generic moments as well, which, when looking at purely the music, is just a bit stagnant and generic. However, one thing that is unique and does not fit in with my roller coaster analogy is that the music does end with another slow buildup and another drop. As the Joker is the last of the burglars standing, we hear the Joker theme of the eerie violin and electric cello playing again, which is filling us with uneasiness and anxiety. As the Joker is getting ready to pull off his mask, the music crescendos more and more until we finally are hit with a big reveal of the Joker's crazed appearance. Hans Zimmer, probably the most recognized name in Hollywood when it comes to composers, aside from John Williams, is a true creative artist, which is manifested beautifully in these dark and twisted themes present not only in this intro, but throughout the entire movie as well. All in all, there's moments in the music score that help convey certain feelings to the audience perfectly, but there's also other moments that are forgettable. For these reasons, the score we would have to give the intro for music would be 7.5 out of 10. Time for the storytelling. First off, this is a very hard one for me to review and rate because I have the benefit of having watched this movie well over 50 times in my life, and that's no exaggeration. So the opening sequence is pretty crystal clear to me in what is actually happening throughout it. However, as I remember back to when I first saw this movie at a midnight showing, back when midnight showings were actually huge events, I recall how confused I was during this opening sequence. Since the opening scene is meant to pull us right into the film, capture all our attention, and set up the rest of the story, I will at first be reviewing this from the lens of a first-time watcher. So to begin, it is clear to the audience that there's some sort of heist or robbery taking place. There's some pieces of the robbery that make a lot of sense and are really easy to follow, such as the reason these two goons are ziplining across to the other building, why they're disabling this alarm, why each person in the bank is given a live grenade, and why the clowns are taking each other out one at a time. They're all necessary steps and actions that need to be taken to rob the bank and limit the number of shares. However, it does get a bit more complicated and confusing to follow with some of the other things. For example, before this clown gets killed, he says,
"That's funny, it didn't dial out to 911. It was trying to reach a private number."
It's a small comment, but a little confusing and hard for a first-time viewer to follow when there's a lot of other more obvious things to pay attention to, such as this other clown raising his arm like he's going to shoot the dude. It gets a little bit more confusing and hard to follow when this guy bursts out with a shotgun. Now, the average first-time viewer probably just sees this dude as an extra line of security for the bank. At least that was my viewpoint when I saw this for the first time. But when he shouts out, we can be a little confused as to what he means by that. Furthermore, before this clown gets killed, he shares that the vault has been wired with 5,000 volts and asks, what kind of a bank does that? Up to this point, I believe the average first-time viewer is a little confused, but fortunately, we're given an answer by the other clown that a mob bank would do that. Now, if it wasn't for that one comment right there would be a lot more confusion in this intro, making the storytelling aspect kind of hard to follow. But it also is just a single comment that some may miss because there are so many other things going on in this opening scene, and we're already trying to process and make sense of everything that's happened so far. Now, before I give my rating, I want to be clear. All of the things I've discussed do work perfectly in telling a more in-depth story, and the more you watch the film, the more you realize how impactful these things are to the film's story as a whole. But when we look at this through the lens of a first-time viewer, a lot of aspects are easy to follow, but there's a few intricate details that we may miss which can be a little bit confusing. For these reasons, the score we will give the opening scene for storytelling is 8 out of 10. There are going to be some haters out there for this score. However, I will be awarding a bonus point as well because I have to take into consideration the experience for the returning viewer as well. Simply put, the intro storytelling means more for those of us who have seen the movie more than once. There's more finite details to pick up on that help fill in some gaps mentioned earlier, which truly does make the storytelling a masterpiece. So overall, we will be giving a 9 out of 10 to the final score when it comes to the storytelling. And now finally, the last category. How captivating as a whole is this intro? I went into a lot of depth in the previous two categories, and this captivating category is sometimes an extension of those previous two. So I'm going to keep this one a little bit more simple. My simple answer is that there is not a single boring moment in this entire opening scene. Honestly, I've watched this intro over and over and over again to see if I could pick out any single moment that is boring, and I cannot identify a single one. Maybe, just maybe, the few moments where watching the Joker walk away from the man with the grenade in his mouth can be a bit uninteresting, but that only lasts for about 1 second, which is so picky and not worth losing any points over. I mean, go watch the intro yourself and see if you can identify any boring moments. Between the important dialogue, the brief shootout in the bank, the clowns taking each other out, and the Joker revealing himself, there's just so many things to pay attention to and be entertained by, which ultimately captivates us. So the score we will be giving the opening scene to The Dark Knight for captivating must be an easy, very easy 10 out of 10. So now, what is the final average score? Well, before I reveal that, I will be awarding one more bonus point as well. I was going to include this in my storytelling piece of the review, but I realized that it pretty much fell into its own little category, which results in a bonus point. As I mentioned before, there are so many storytelling aspects that one can pick up on each time they watch this movie. In that same vein, there's so many small details people can pick up on each time they watch it, which just adds to the genius of Christopher Nolan's filmmaking. And they're not even major things either that have some huge impact to the movie. Just small little details that add to it. For example, the way the Joker just examines the shotgun he steals from this guy as he's walking to the bus makes me laugh every time. And I also believe this is the same shotgun he uses later on in the movie. Other things about this intro that you typically don't pick up on or notice the first time through is this guy's complete disregard for others' safety as he's trying to get the Joker, which we now know is because he's with the mob. And lastly, when the Joker looks at this guy after he shoots him, I always wonder, what kind of look is he showing under that mask? What is the Joker thinking? Does the Joker have respect for him? him? Is the Joker amused at his failed attempt to stop him? There's just so many cool things to notice and pick up on and think more deeply about with this intro that's simply impossible to do with only seeing this movie once. Which is why this intro deserves another bonus point. So in conclusion, the final total score we will be giving The Dark Knight for the opening scene is 27.5 out of 30, which averages out to 9.16 out of 10. The highest ranking of any of my intro reviews thus far, and well deserved. So there you have it, my review for The Dark Knight intro. If you made it this far and enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and maybe even subscribing. If there's an intro to a movie you'd love for me to review that I haven't done yet, please let me know in the comments and I will be sure to prioritize that movie next. Anyways, thank you for the support and sticking around for another Too True SMEG review. Until next time.